In the attic of a condemned house, a construction worker unearths a wooden box containing 4 baby hospital bracelets, a torn photograph, and a desperate letter. "If anyone finds this, please forgive my children." What dark secrets lie buried in this 20-year-old mystery? As a retired nurse trembles at the sight of these forgotten relics on the evening news, a young man with a crescent-shaped birthmark by his eye feels an inexplicable connection to the story. Meanwhile, a teenage girl with autism draws 4 stars connected by a single line, a symbol she couldn't possibly know exists. 4 babies, 3 families, one shocking truth that powerful people will kill to keep hidden. This haunting journey reveals how far a mother's love can reach across time, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us, even when we're torn apart. Follow our channel for the full story, like and comment to let us know where you're watching from, and join the thousands of viewers who can't look away from this heart-wrenching real-life mystery. The steel-gray clouds hung low over Little Rock, Arkansas, as if burdened by the weight of secrets they carried. November had arrived, with a biting chill that seeped through the threadbare jacket of Wendell Hargrove, a construction worker who stood before the dilapidated Victorian house on Maple Street. Yellow tape cordoned off the property, fluttering in the bitter wind like warning flags. The structure, once majestic, now stood condemned, windows boarded up, paint peeling like scabs from an old wound. "Daddy, how long will you be?" came the small voice from the truck parked across the street. Wendell turned to see his 14-year-old daughter, Lily, her face pressed against the passenger window, fingers tracing invisible patterns on the glass. Autism had closed many doors for her, but opened windows into a world most couldn't see. "Just a couple hours, sweetheart," he called back, forcing a smile that didn't reach his tired eyes. "Draw something beautiful for me while you wait." The foreman approached, clipboard in hand. "Hargrove, you're on roof duty. We need all that debris cleared before demolition tomorrow." Wendell nodded, grabbing his tool belt. 3 years a widower, he'd learned to say little and work much. The pay was decent enough to cover Lily's therapy and the small apartment they now called home. A far cry from the life they'd had before cancer took his wife, leaving behind medical bills that still arrived monthly like cruel reminders. The ancient wooden ladder creaked under his weight as he climbed to the roof, each rung a testament to the house's neglect. 48 hours, and this place would be nothing but rubble and memory. Something about that thought made his chest tighten. How many lives had passed through these walls? How many dreams had lived and died here? The roof was a mess of fallen branches, rotted shingles, and debris collected over years of abandonment. Wendell set to work, his shovel scraping against the weathered surface. The monotonous rhythm was almost meditative, allowing his mind to wander to the grocery list, Lily's upcoming doctor's appointment, the rent due next week. Clang! The metallic sound echoed across the rooftop as his shovel hit something solid, not the hollow thud of wood, but something with resistance. Wendell paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. Curious, he scraped away at the spot, revealing what appeared to be a small trapdoor, almost invisible against the weathered roofing. "What the hell?" he muttered, kneeling to examine it. The hatch was sealed shut with faded duct tape, turned brittle with age. Around its edges, crude nails had been hammered in haphazardly, as if in desperate haste. With the claw of his hammer, Wendell pried at the nails, each one coming loose with a reluctant squeal. The duct tape crumbled at his touch, disintegrating into dust. His heart began to quicken. There was something intimate about this moment, like reading someone's diary without permission, but curiosity, that most human of afflictions, pushed him forward. The trapdoor lifted with surprising ease to reveal a small cavity beneath, and there it was, a wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox, its surface darkened with age and humidity. It had been wrapped in plastic, now yellowed and cracked, but had protected the contents from the worst of the elements. Wendell's calloused hands trembled slightly as he lifted it out. The box felt heavier than it looked, as if weighted down by more than just its physical contents. He brushed away decades of dust, revealing intricate carvings on the lid, 4 small stars, connected by a single line. "Yo, Hargrove, you taking a nap up there?" The foreman's voice boomed from below, startling him. "Just clearing some difficult debris," Wendell called back, quickly tucking the box under his arm. Something told him this wasn't meant for the demolition company's lost and found. Back on solid ground, he slipped the box into his truck while Lily was distracted with her drawings. The rest of his shift passed in a blur, his mind constantly wandering back to the mysterious container and what secrets it might hold. It wasn't until later that evening, with Lily finally asleep in her room, surrounded by her drawings of fantastical creatures, that Wendell allowed himself to examine his discovery. Sitting at the kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light, he carefully pried open the lid. The smell hit him first, musty and ancient, like disturbed earth. Inside, nestled in what appeared to be a faded baby blanket, were 4 hospital bracelets. Tiny plastic bands, yellowed with age, each bearing faded text that Wendell had to squint to read. Dates, times, and names, or rather partial names, as if hastily written. One read, Baby Girl H, another, Baby Boy H1. The pattern continued for numbers 2 and 3. Beneath the bracelets lay a photograph, its edges ragged as if torn from a larger image. 4 newborns, impossibly small, lying side by side in what looked like a makeshift crib. Quadruplets, their tiny faces scrunched in the universal expression of the newly arrived. On the back, a date written in fading ink, November 12th, 1986, almost exactly 20 years ago, but it was the final item that made Wendell's breath catch. A letter, folded and refolded so many times that the creases had begun to tear. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, each word pressed deeply into the paper as if the writer had been bearing down with the weight of unbearable emotion. If anyone finds this, please, forgive my children. I tried. I swear to God I tried. They deserved better than me, better than this life. I hope someday they'll understand. I hope someday they'll find each other again, because they were never supposed to be apart. Never. The letter was unsigned, but a small drawing at the bottom caught his eye, the same 4 stars connected by a single line that had been carved into the box. Wendell sat back, a heaviness settling in his chest. 4 babies, 20 years ago, in this house. What had happened here? The following morning, Wendell called in sick for the first time in 3 years. Instead, he drove to the local news station, box carefully placed on the passenger seat, Lily in the back with her sketch pad. Something about this felt important, bigger than him, bigger than his problems. The young reporter, Jessica Winters, initially seemed skeptical, but became increasingly interested as Wendell revealed the contents of the box. By afternoon, the items were laid out on her desk, photographed for the evening news. This could be nothing, she cautioned, adjusting her glasses. Old mementos, forgotten during a move. Or it could be something, Wendell replied quietly. Those babies would be adults now. Maybe they don't know about each other. Maybe they're looking for answers. Jessica nodded slowly. We'll run it tonight. Human interest piece. Mystery box found in condemned house. If there's anyone out there connected to this, it might reach them. 30 miles away, in a small trailer park on the outskirts of Little Rock, 68-year-old Ruth Simmons sat alone, nursing a cup of coffee and watching the evening news, a ritual she'd maintained since retirement from nursing 5 years ago. The loneliness of her days was punctuated only by these broadcasts, windows into a world that continued to spin without her. The segment about the box came on after a story about rising gas prices. Ruth half listened at first, her mind wandering as it often did these days. But then the camera panned to the items laid out on the newsroom desk. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the linoleum floor. She didn't notice the scalding liquid seeping into her house slippers. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, on the 4 tiny hospital bracelets she recognized all too well. "Oh my God," she whispered, her weathered hands beginning to tremble uncontrollably. "It's them." Tears filled her eyes as decades of buried memories came rushing back. Her breathing became shallow, panic rising in her chest like a tide. "They were supposed to stay together," she whispered to the empty room, her voice breaking. "That was the promise. Dear God, what have I done?" Outside her window, the November wind howled through the trailer park, carrying away her words but not her guilt. In that moment, as the news anchor moved on to sports and weather, Ruth Simmons made a decision. After 20 years of silence, it was finally time to speak the truth. The first rays of dawn crept through the tattered curtains of Ruth Simmons' trailer, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like ghostly witnesses. She hadn't slept a wink, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from tears that had flowed freely throughout the night. The shattered coffee mug still lay on the floor, its dark stain dried into the linoleum. A physical manifestation of the moment her carefully constructed world had cracked open. Ruth's gnarled fingers trembled as she pulled an old leather-bound box from beneath her bed. The hinges protested with a melancholy creak as she opened it, revealing treasures she had forbidden herself to touch for nearly 2 decades. A faded hospital ID badge pinned to a wrinkled nurse's cap. A Polaroid photograph, its colors muted by time. And beneath it all, a yellowed piece of paper torn from a medical chart, preserved in a plastic sleeve as if it were a sacred relic. "God forgive me," she whispered, the words catching in her throat like barbed wire. The morning news played in the background, repeating the story from last night. The reporter's voice seemed to mock her, repeating the address of the condemned house on Maple Street, a place Ruth had driven past countless times over the years, never brave enough to stop. Decision made, Ruth dressed in her best outfit, a floral dress she'd worn to church back when she still believed prayer could wash away her sins. She applied lipstick with an unsteady hand, missing the corners of her thin lips. Her reflection stared back at her from the bathroom mirror, a stranger with haunted eyes and secrets etched into every wrinkle. The television station was located downtown, a modern glass building that made Ruth feel even more ancient and out of place as she approached. The security guard at the front desk regarded her with suspicion as she clutched her purse with white-knuckled intensity. "I need to speak with the reporter," she insisted, her voice stronger than she felt. "Jessica Winters. About the box, the babies." Something in her desperate tone must have conveyed the urgency, because 30 minutes later, Ruth found herself seated in a small conference room across from the young reporter, whose skeptical expression had transformed into one of intense interest. "Mrs. Simmons, you're saying you were there the night these babies were born?" Jessica asked, recorder running between them on the polished table. Ruth nodded, her throat constricting. "I was the head nurse on the maternity ward at Little Rock Community Hospital in 1986. Her fingers caressed the faded ID badge she'd placed on the table. "November 12th, just past midnight. I'll never forget it as long as I live." Jessica leaned forward, her eyes sharp with journalistic hunger. "Tell me everything." And so Ruth did, the words spilling out like poison from an infected wound. How a young, homeless woman had been brought in by police, already in the late stages of labor. How the doctors had been shocked to discover she was carrying not 1, but 4 babies. How the delivery had been complicated but successful. 4 tiny miracles, born within minutes of each other. "Quadruplets are rare enough," Ruth explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But these were even more special. 2 identical boys, a fraternal boy, and a little girl. The odds are astronomical." "What happened to them?" Jessica prompted when Ruth fell silent, lost in memories. Ruth's eyes filled with fresh tears. "They disappeared, all 4 of them, just vanished from the nursery the next morning." Jessica's pen froze mid-note. "Kidnapped." A bitter laugh escaped Ruth's lips. "That's what everyone thought. There was an investigation, but it went nowhere. The mother was already gone by then, taken back to the station for questioning about her identity since she had no documents. She never returned to claim her babies." Ruth's hands shook as she unfolded the piece of paper from her box, sliding it across to Jessica. It was a partial hospital record, water-stained and torn, but with 4 names clearly visible, handwritten in blue ink. "Michael, Thomas, Jonathan, and Eliza," Ruth said, her finger tracing each name with a reverence that bordered on religious. "But one of them," she pointed to the first name, which had been crossed out with angry strokes of a pen. Jessica studied the document. "Why is this one crossed out?" "I don't know," Ruth admitted, her voice breaking. "But there's something else. Something I've never told anyone." She reached into her purse and withdrew a small black and white photo, its edges worn soft from handling. 4 newborns bundled together in a single bassinet. One of the boys, Jonathan, had a small birthmark right here. She tapped the photo near one baby's eye, shaped like a crescent moon. You wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. Jessica carefully placed the items in an evidence bag. "Mrs. Simmons, why come forward now after all these years?" Ruth's eyes clouded with a mixture of grief and determination. "Because I've been silent too long. Because those children deserved better." She clutched Jessica's wrist with surprising strength. "And because I know things about that night, things that were covered up. People in this town, important people, they wanted those babies to disappear." "What people?" Jessica pressed, her reporter's instinct sensing a bigger story. "I can't." Ruth glanced nervously toward the door. "Not here. Not yet. But I've kept records, names." Dates. She lowered her voice to a whisper. The mother's name was Lydia Harper. She wasn't just some homeless woman. She was running from something, or someone. She told me she'd been staying in that house on Maple Street, hiding. The interview continued for another hour, Ruth revealing pieces of a puzzle she'd carried in silence for decades. As she left the station, the burden seemed both lighter and heavier simultaneously. The truth was finally emerging from the shadows. But Ruth knew better than most that some secrets fought back when exposed to light. That evening, the story aired with dramatic urgency. Jessica's voiceover narrated as images of the hospital bracelets, the mysterious box, and Ruth's badge filled the screen. A 20-year-old mystery begins to unravel, she intoned. 4 babies, born to a mother in crisis, 4 children, separated against their will. And the question remains, where are they now? In a modest apartment across town, a young postal worker named Jonah Mitchell froze in the act of heating his microwave dinner, his attention captured by the small TV on his counter. His hand unconsciously rose to touch the crescent-shaped birthmark beside his right eye, a feature that had earned him the childhood nickname Moon Boy in the series of foster homes he'd grown up in. Impossible, he whispered to his empty kitchen as something long dormant stirred in his soul, a sense of belonging he'd never known he was missing. Jonah Mitchell's hands shook as he dialed the number flashing on his television screen. The plastic receiver felt slippery against his palm, each ring on the other end sending his heart rate climbing higher. After the 5th ring, when he was about to hang up, a tired voice answered, "Channel 7 News, this is Jessica Winters." Jonah's voice caught in his throat. What exactly was he supposed to say? That he might be one of the missing babies? That the crescent-shaped birthmark by his right eye matched the description from the news? It sounded absurd, even to him. "I'm calling about your story, the Quadruplets." There was a pause on the other end, then the sound of shuffling papers. "Yes? Do you have information?" Jonah took a deep breath, staring at his reflection in the darkened window of his studio apartment. At 23, his face still held a boyish quality, despite the perpetual shadows under his eyes from working double shifts at the post office. The birthmark stood out against his pale skin, a permanent crescent moon that had followed him through 17 different foster homes. "I think I might be one of them, Jonathan." The silence that followed felt like an eternity before Jessica's voice returned, noticeably more alert. "Can you come to the station tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock? After hanging up, Jonah sank onto his threadbare couch, the weight of possibility crushing his chest. His entire life had been defined by not knowing his parents, not knowing his origins, not knowing why his birth certificate was clearly a forgery with inconsistent dates that no one had bothered to fix. Could this finally be the answer? He pulled out the battered shoebox where he kept his few personal documents. The birth certificate listed his birthplace as Oklahoma City, though his first foster placement had been in Little Rock. No parents named. The space for mother simply read unknown. For father, a stark line of emptiness. Jonah had long ago accepted these blank spaces as the foundation of his identity, a person built on absence. Across town, in a suburban neighborhood where pristine lawns defied the autumn chill, Wendell Hargrove sat on the floor of his living room, surrounded by printouts of news articles, internet searches, and his daughter Lily's drawings. The wall before him had transformed into an impromptu investigation board, with string connecting photos to names, dates to locations. "Daddy, they're lost," Lily said quietly, rocking slightly as she sat cross-legged beside him. She rarely spoke this clearly, making her words all the more impactful when she did. "Who's lost, sweetheart?" Wendell asked, glancing up from a 1986 newspaper clipping about a police search for a missing homeless woman. Lily didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her markers and began drawing on a large sheet of paper. 4 stick figures emerged under her careful hand, 3 with short hair, 1 with long. Then, methodically, she began scribbling over 3 of them with violent black strokes, leaving only 1 untouched. The figure with long hair. "Lily, what are you trying to tell me?" Wendell asked, a chill running down his spine as he watched his daughter's unusual behavior. Normally, her drawings featured fantastical creatures or geometric patterns, never people. "1 found," she whispered, tapping the remaining figure. 3 lost. Her eyes, usually unfocused, met his with startling clarity. The girl knows. Before Wendell could question her further, his phone rang. It was Jessica Winters from the news station. "Mr. Hargrove, you won't believe what's happening. We've had over 300 calls since the story aired. People born in '86, people who worked at the hospital, people claiming to know the mother." Her voice thrummed with excitement. But one caller in particular, a young man with a crescent-shaped birthmark by his eye, just like Ruth described. Wendell's gaze drifted to the letter from the box, now encased in a plastic sleeve on the floor beside him. "The letter mentioned something I didn't understand before," he said slowly. "I hope someday they'll find each other again. Because they were never supposed to be apart. They were separated, Jessica. The quadruplets were split up." "But why?" Jessica asked, the question hanging heavy between them. "I don't know yet, but there's something else bothering me." Wendell picked up the letter, studying the faded handwriting. "It says, 'Forgive my children,' not 'forgive me.' Why would the children need forgiveness?" The following morning, a small group gathered in the Channel 7 conference room. Wendell sat beside Jessica, both watching with intense interest as Jonah Mitchell carefully examined the contents of the wooden box. His fingers hovered over the hospital bracelets, a muscle working in his jaw. "I've never had anything," he said quietly. "Nothing from my birth. No baby photos, no keepsakes, just paperwork." He touched one of the bracelets with reverence. "Baby boy H3. Could be me. Could be any baby born that day. But the birthmark," Jessica prompted. "That can't be coincidence." Jonah's hand unconsciously rose to touch the mark beside his eye. "I've always had it. Foster mom said it looked like someone had kissed me there before sending me into the world." His laugh was hollow, devoid of humor. Ruth Simmons entered the room, her steps faltering when she saw Jonah. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes widening in shock. "It's you," she whispered. "Dear God, it's really you." She approached slowly, as if afraid he might disappear. "Jonathan." "I go by Jonah now," he said automatically, uncomfortable under her intense scrutiny. Ruth nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Of course you do. Of course." She reached into her purse and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "I brought something. The rest of the hospital record I saved. I was too scared to show it yesterday." Jessica unfolded the paper, revealing a complete admission form. "Lydia Harper," she read aloud. 22 years old. No known address. Emergency contact." She frowned. "It's been marked out." "Look at the note at the bottom," Ruth said, her voice tight with emotion. In the margin, scrawled in different handwriting, were the words, "One stillborn. Death certificate issued for baby boy H2. Case closed by order of Dr. B.T." "But there was no stillborn," Ruth insisted, her voice rising with distress. "All 4 babies were healthy. I held them in my arms. Someone changed the records." "B.T.," Wendell repeated, the initials sparking recognition. "Those initials were on the back of the photograph in the box." "Bradley Thompson," Ruth confirmed, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He was the attending physician that night, very connected in the community. His family practically built this town." As the group digested this information, Lily, who had been sitting quietly in the corner with her sketchpad, suddenly approached the table. She placed her drawing in the center, a perfect rendition of the 4-star pattern carved into the wooden box. "The girl knows," she repeated, her voice dreamlike. "She remembers the stars." All eyes turned to Lily's drawing, then back to the star pattern on the box. "What girl, sweetheart?" Wendell asked gently. But Lily had retreated back into herself, returning to her corner and a new drawing. This one of a house with a steeply pitched roof, a small figure standing at its apex, arms outstretched toward the sky. "The letter said one of them didn't survive," Jonah said, breaking the heavy silence. "But all 4 bracelets were in the box. If one died, why keep the bracelet?" "Because they lied," Ruth said simply, her weathered face lined with decades of carried guilt. "Someone wanted the world to believe there were only 3 babies. But I know the truth, I was there." As the group continued to piece together the puzzle, none of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street from the station, its tinted windows concealing the occupant who watched the building with calculated interest, a cell phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, she's talking," the man said into the phone, his voice cold and clinical. "And she's not alone." Dawn broke over the trailer park, with reluctant fingers of pale light stretching across the frost-covered ground. Wendell pulled his truck to a stop outside Ruth's mobile home, the engine's rumble seeming unnaturally loud in the morning stillness. He'd promised to drive her to the hospital archives to search for more records. his construction job temporarily abandoned in pursuit of answers. "You sure about this?" he asked himself quietly, glancing at the slip of paper where he'd jotted down Ruth's address. This investigation was consuming him, pulling him away from the predictable routine that had sustained him since his wife's death. Yet something about the mystery spoke to the empty spaces in his own life, the questions without answers, the loneliness that echoed in his chest at night when Lily was finally asleep. He approached the faded blue trailer, noting the neat curtains and the small ceramic gnome standing guard by the 3 concrete steps. A wind chime tinkled softly above the door. Wendell knocked twice, then waited, stamping his feet against the morning chill. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Ruth? It's Wendell Hargrove." The silence that followed felt wrong somehow, heavy with absence. Wendell peered through the window beside the door, cupping his hands against the glass to block the reflection. What he saw made his stomach drop. The small living room was in disarray, a lamp knocked over, papers scattered across the floor, a chair overturned. "Ruth!" he called louder now, pounding on the door. When no response came, he tried the knob. It turned easily in his hand, the door swinging open with an ominous creak. The interior of the trailer told a clear story of struggle. Besides the overturned furniture, there were damp spots on the carpet that Wendell recognized with a construction worker's eye as recent water spills. A mug lay shattered on the linoleum of the kitchenette, dark coffee stains surrounding it like a grotesque halo. But it was the wall above Ruth's small writing desk that chilled him to the bone. A collage of newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes had been viciously torn down, leaving only ragged scraps of paper and bent thumbtacks. In their place, a single word had been written in what looked disturbingly like lipstick. "Silence." "Jesus Christ," Wendell muttered, pulling out his cell phone to call Jessica Winters. As he waited for her to answer, he moved cautiously through the small space, careful not to disturb potential evidence. The bedroom was similarly ransacked, dresser drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor, the mattress askew as if someone had checked beneath it. On the bedside table, a single item remained undisturbed, a silver-framed photograph of a pregnant woman, her face carefully scratched out with something sharp. Below the photo, a small wooden box lay open, emptied of its contents. "Wendell, what's up?" Jessica's voice finally came through on his phone. "Ruth's gone," he replied tersely, his eyes fixed on the defaced photograph. "Someone took her, and I think they were looking for something specific." 30 minutes later, Jessica arrived with a police officer in tow, a friend from the crime beat who'd agreed to check things out unofficially. Officer Daniels surveyed the scene with practiced eyes, taking notes in a small spiral pad. "Looks like a burglary gone wrong," he suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "Any idea what might have been taken?" "Information," Wendell replied, gesturing to the stripped wall. She had been collecting evidence about those quadruplets for years. Hospital records, newspaper clippings, notes. Officer Daniels frowned. "The missing babies from '86, that's ancient history." "Not to someone," Jessica pointed out, photographing the lipstick message with her phone. "This doesn't look like a random break-in. This was targeted." While they spoke, Wendell noticed something protruding from beneath the small sofa, the corner of what appeared to be another box. He knelt to retrieve it, finding a shoebox filled with old photographs, its lid decorated with pressed flowers. "Look at this," he said, holding up a photo he'd pulled from the stack. It showed a much younger Ruth in a nurse's uniform, standing beside 3 other hospital staff members. On the back was written, "Maternity Ward Team, 1986. One of the faces had been circled in red ink, a distinguished-looking man with silver temples and wire-rimmed glasses. Below it, Ruth had written, "Dr. BT. He knows what happened to them." Across town, in his sparse apartment, Jonah Mitchell sat at his small kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of his adoption records. He'd called in sick to the post office, claiming a stomach virus, though the real illness was the obsessive need to find answers that had infected him since seeing the news report. His adoption had been processed in Kansas City, nearly 300 miles from Little Rock. According to the paperwork, he'd been abandoned as a newborn at a fire station in Oklahoma, then transferred to Kansas through an emergency placement program, but the dates didn't align. If he'd been born in November 1986, as the hospital bracelet suggested, why did his earliest foster care records begin in January 1987? 2 months unaccounted for. 2 months of his existence erased. A sharp knock at his door startled him from his thoughts. Jonah approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see Jessica Winters standing in the hallway, her expression grim. "What's happened?" he asked, opening the door. "Ruth Simmons is missing," she replied without preamble. "And we think whoever took her is trying to suppress information about you and your siblings." The word siblings hit Jonah like a physical blow. All his life he'd been alone, shuttled from one temporary home to another, never belonging anywhere or to anyone. The concept of having brothers and a sister was so foreign it almost didn't compute. "Come with me," Jessica continued, already turning back toward the elevator. "There's someone you need to meet." 20 minutes later, Jonah found himself in a small coffee shop downtown, seated across from a young woman with copper-colored hair and eyes the exact shade of green as his own. She wore a silver pendant around her neck, a delicate E surrounded by a heart. "Jonah, this is Eliza Marie Donovan," Jessica introduced them. "Eliza, this is Jonah Mitchell. The birthmark matches the description Ruth gave us." The woman, Eliza, stared at him with an intensity that made him squirm. "You have our mother's eyes," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our mother?" Jonah repeated, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "How do you know? Do you remember her?" Eliza shook her head, her fingers absently toying with the pendant. "I was adopted by the Donovans when I was 3 months old. They told me my birth mother died in childbirth." Her mouth twisted bitterly. "Apparently that was a lie." "The Donovans," Jessica interjected. "Were they from around here?" "No. Minnesota, they moved a lot. My father was difficult." Something dark flashed across Eliza's face. "When I turned 18, I found my original birth certificate hidden in my adoptive mother's closet. It listed my birthplace as Little Rock." She reached into her purse and withdrew a folded document, sliding it across the table. But there was something strange written on it, a name I couldn't explain. Jonah unfolded the paper. There, scribbled in the margin in faded blue ink, was a single word. "Annabelle? Who's Annabelle?" he asked, looking up in confusion. "I don't know," Eliza admitted. "But when I saw the news report about the quadruplets, something clicked. I've had dreams my whole life about a baby crying. 3 babies crying. I always thought it was just a weird, recurring nightmare." As they spoke, none of them noticed the man at the next table, newspaper raised to conceal his face, listening intently to every word. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of Peaceful Pines retirement home, casting jewel-toned patterns across the linoleum floor. The facility smelled of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables, the soundtrack a cacophony of daytime television, shuffling walkers, and the occasional distant cry from a resident lost in the fog of dementia. Wendell Hargrove adjusted the visitor badge pinned to his shirt as he walked beside Jessica Winters down the East Wing corridor. They had come in search of Dr. Bradley Thompson, the mysterious BT, whose initials appeared repeatedly throughout their investigation. A call to the Arkansas Medical Board had revealed that the once prominent physician now resided here, his brilliant mind gradually being erased by early-onset Alzheimer's. "Remember," Jessica whispered as they approached room 219, "we're supposed to be his nephew and niece from Chicago. The staff said he sometimes has moments of clarity, but they don't last." Wendell nodded, his stomach tight with nervous anticipation. The photograph of Dr. Thompson from Ruth's collection revealed a distinguished man with aristocratic features and confident eyes. Would there be anything left of that man behind the door they now faced? The room was small but private, a luxury afforded by Thompson's considerable wealth. By the window sat an elderly man in a high-backed chair, his once commanding frame now hunched and diminished. He stared out at the manicured grounds, seemingly transfixed by a cardinal perched on a nearby branch. "Uncle Bradley?" Jessica ventured, her voice gentle as she approached. "It's Jessica and Wendell. We've come to visit you." Dr. Thompson turned slowly, his watery blue eyes vacant at first, then flickering with confusion. "Jessica?" He frowned, the name clearly meaningless to him. "Your brother's children," Wendell supplied, taking the seat opposite the doctor. "From Chicago, remember?" Thompson nodded vaguely, though it was clear he remembered no such thing. His fingers, once steady enough to perform delicate surgeries, now trembled as they plucked at the blanket draped across his knees. "I brought you something," Jessica said, carefully withdrawing the photograph from Ruth's collection. She placed it on the small table between them. "From the hospital. When you worked in maternity. The effect was immediate and startling. Thompson's eyes widened, his posture straightening as he snatched up the photograph with surprising agility. Where did you get this? The fog had lifted from his voice, replaced by sharp alarm. We found it, Wendell answered carefully. At Ruth Simmons' place. She kept it all these years. Ruth, Thompson repeated, a mixture of emotions crossing his face too quickly to identify. Stubborn woman. Never knew when to let things lie. Jessica leaned forward, sensing a rare moment of lucidity. Uncle Bradley, we're trying to understand what happened that night, November 12, 1986, the Quadruplets. Thompson's gaze darted between them, suspicion replacing confusion. You're not Randall's children, he stated flatly. I don't have a brother named Randall. Wendell and Jessica exchanged glances, their cover blown. But before they could formulate a response, Thompson continued, his words flowing with increasing urgency. They were supposed to stay together. That was the plan. But someone paid. So much money. His fingers crumpled the edge of the photograph. I couldn't stop it. Wouldn't have made a difference if I tried. What happened to the babies? Wendell pressed, hardly daring to breathe for fear of breaking the spell of clarity. Separated. Sold. Thompson's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 healthy babies. Perfect merchandise for the right buyers. Childless couples willing to pay anything, no questions asked. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. They were trafficked? Illegally adopted? Thompson nodded, his eyes focused on some middle distance, seeing not the retirement home but the past. The judge signed the papers, falsified everything. Birth certificates, death records, adoption forms. I just provided the medical cover. His voice cracked with what might have been remorse. I told them all 4 had to go together, but they wouldn't listen. All 4, Wendell repeated, but the record said 1 died. Baby boy H2. A bitter laugh escaped Thompson's lips. No one died. That was the story for the authorities. Clean and simple. A tragic stillbirth. Case closed. His eyes suddenly focused on Wendell with startling clarity. But she was the problem. The girl. Annabelle. Jessica and Wendell exchanged shocked glances at the name they'd seen scrawled on Eliza's birth certificate. Annabelle? Who's Annabelle? The 4th baby, Thompson whispered. Too small. Weak lungs. Not marketable. His face contorted with a spasm of shame. They couldn't sell her. Wouldn't make back the investment. So they... He trailed off, his momentary clarity beginning to fade. They what? Wendell prompted, desperate to keep the doctor present. What happened to Annabelle? Thompson's eyes began to drift, his attention scattering like leaves in a breeze. I check on her. Every month, all these years, it was the least I could do. He reached for Jessica's hand with surprising strength. She draws the stars. Always the stars. 4 of them. Connected. Where is she? Jessica asked urgently. Dr. Thompson, please, where did they take Annabelle? But the moment was gone. Thompson's face went slack, his eyes once again vacant. Is it time for my medicine? He asked in a childlike voice. Martha always brings my medicine at 4. Back in the parking lot, Wendell and Jessica sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd learned. Illegal adoptions, Jessica finally said, her reporter's mind already forming the headline. Babies sold to the highest bidder. But who was behind it? Wendell wondered aloud. Thompson said they. Who are they? Jessica scrolled through the photos on her phone. And what about this Annabelle? If she wasn't adopted out like the others, where did she end up? Wendell started the truck, his mind racing. Thompson said he still checks on her. That means she's somewhere nearby, somewhere he could visit regularly, even as his mind deteriorated. A hospital, Jessica suggested. A care facility? Wendell nodded slowly, an idea forming. Let's check Thompson's visitor records here at Peaceful Pines, see if he ever leaves for regular appointments. That evening, the group reconvened in Wendell's living room. Jessica, Jonah, Eliza, and Lily, who sat cross-legged on the floor, meticulously arranging colored pencils by shade. The mood was tense with anticipation as Jessica shared what they'd learned from Dr. Thompson. Sold, Eliza repeated, her voice hollow with disbelief. We were sold? Jonah paced the small room, unable to contain his agitation. That explains the inconsistencies in our paperwork, the gaps in the timeline. His hand absently touched the crescent birthmark by his eye. All these years I thought I was abandoned, thrown away, but someone paid for me. A bitter laugh escaped him. I don't know which is worse. And this Annabelle, Eliza said softly. She's our sister. The fourth baby? Jessica nodded, reviewing her notes. According to Thompson, she was too small, had health problems, not marketable enough for their scheme. So they kept her somewhere, Wendell added. Thompson's been visiting her for years, apparently. A small voice interrupted their discussion. Behind the mirror, Lily said, not looking up from her careful arrangement of pencils. The girl is behind the mirror. All eyes turned to Wendell's daughter. What did you say, sweetheart? Wendell asked gently. But Lily had retreated again into her private world, humming softly to herself as she created perfect gradients of color. Beside her on the floor lay her latest drawing, a mirror with a face peering out from its reflective surface, surrounded by 4 stars connected by a single line. The phone call came at 5:17 a.m., jolting Wendell from a fitful sleep. He fumbled for his cell on the nightstand, squinting at the bright screen in the darkness. Jessica Winter's name flashed urgently. Wendell! Her voice was tight with emotion. They found Ruth. His stomach dropped. Where? Is she okay? The silence on the other end lasted a beat too long. No, she's gone, Wendell. A jogger found her body in McAllister Park this morning. The words hit him like physical blows. Gone, body this morning. Each phrase a nail in the coffin of hope. Wendell sat up, running a hand over his face, trying to process what he was hearing. What happened? He managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking Lily in the next room. Police are saying natural causes. Heart attack. She was 73 after all. Jessica's tone made it clear she didn't buy the official explanation. I'm heading to the scene now. Meet me there? 40 minutes later, Wendell stood beside Jessica at the periphery of a small clearing in McAllister Park, watching as forensic technicians photographed the area where Ruth's body had been discovered. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the early morning breeze, keeping a small crowd of curious onlookers at bay. Something's not right, Jessica murmured, her reporter's instincts on high alert. Look at the position they found her in, sitting on the bench, hands folded in her lap. Does that look like a heart attack to you? Wendell had to agree it didn't. People who died of heart attacks typically collapsed, often showing signs of the pain and distress that preceded death. Ruth looked almost arranged. Officer Daniels approached them, his expression grim. You two again? Should have known you'd show up. He sighed, glancing over his shoulder to ensure no other officers were within earshot. Medical examiner's preliminary assessment is cardiac arrest, but there's something odd. Small scratches on her fingernails, like she clawed at something. And this. He discreetly showed them a photo on his phone, a close-up of Ruth's right hand. Pressed between her fingers was a small sealed envelope. It was addressed to whoever brings the 4 together, Daniels explained. Me almost missed it. I've got the actual envelope in evidence, but I snapped a photo of what was inside. He swiped to the next image, a handwritten note in Ruth's shaky script. Storage unit number 247, Central Keep, key under the gnome. Jessica and Wendell exchanged meaningful glances, both remembering the ceramic gnome outside Ruth's trailer. By noon, they stood before the roll-up door of Unit 247 at Central Keep Storage, the small key retrieved from beneath Ruth's garden gnome, fitting perfectly into the padlock. The heavy metal door groaned as Wendell pushed it upward, revealing a space no larger than a modest walk-in closet, illuminated only by the harsh fluorescent lights from the corridor. Inside, stacked in neat piles against the walls, were dozens of cardboard boxes labeled with years, 1986 through 2006. In the center of the concrete floor stood a single wooden chair, and on it, another envelope. This one was thicker, sealed with red wax, pressed with the imprint of a 4-pointed star. She knew someone was after her, Jessica whispered, surveying the meticulously organized archive Ruth had compiled. She left this for us to find. With trembling fingers, Wendell broke the wax seal. Inside was a thick stack of documents, photocopied records, news clippings, and a handwritten letter dated just 3 days earlier. If you're reading this, Ruth had written, then my fears were justified. I always knew they might silence me if I spoke the truth. But the truth cannot remain buried forever. The pages that followed detailed a conspiracy that stole the breath from their lungs, a sophisticated operation that had been trafficking babies through illegal adoptions for decades. Ruth had meticulously documented names, dates, and amounts paid. Babies born to vulnerable women, homeless, addicted, imprisoned, whose children were essentially stolen through falsified documents and corrupt officials. The quadruplets were special, Ruth wrote. Most valuable merchandise they'd ever had. 3 healthy, matching infants they could sell for premium prices. But the 4th baby complicated things. Annabelle was too frail, too sickly to command a high price, but they couldn't risk leaving her behind as evidence. So they did something they'd never done before. They faked her death while actually keeping her alive. Judge Vernon Whitley signed all the paperwork, Jessica read aloud, her voice hushed with horror. He's still on the bench. 9th Circuit Court. And Dr. Thompson provided medical cover, Wendell added, scanning the documents. But according to Ruth, they were just middlemen. The real architect was someone named Chambers, Edward Chambers. Jessica frowned. Why does that name sound familiar? Because it's on buildings all over town, came a new voice from the storage unit entrance. They turned to find Jonah standing in the doorway, Eliza beside him. Both looked pale, as if they'd seen a ghost. Edward Chambers Foundation funds half the charitable organizations in Little Rock, Eliza explained, stepping into the unit, including the Children's Psychiatric Hospital, where Dr. Thompson has been visiting monthly for the past 20 years. Ridgeview Psychiatric, Jonah added. We looked up Thompson's visitor logs like you suggested. He goes there on the first Tuesday of every month, has been since 1987. Annabelle, Wendell breathed. She must be there. The final pages of Ruth's package contained one more shocking revelation, a photocopy of a ledger showing payments from the Chambers Foundation to Ridgeview for the ongoing care of patient A.H. Next to it was a photograph taken through what appeared to be a window. A young woman with copper-colored hair like Eliza's, sitting alone in a room, staring at the wall. On the back of the photo, Ruth had written, Annabelle Harper, still wearing her hospital bracelet after all these years. We need to get to Ridgeview, Jessica said, already gathering the documents. But we need to be careful. If Chambers realizes we know... It's too late for that, Jonah interrupted, his face grim. Someone followed us here. Black sedan, tinted windows. Same car that was outside the news station the day we all met. As if on cue, Wendell's phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor. Where are you? Police at your house looking for you and Lily. A cold dread washed over him. Lily, he whispered. She's at school. He showed them the message. We need to go, now. They left through the back exit of the storage facility, using Jessica's car since it was less recognizable than Wendell's truck. As they pulled onto the main road, Eliza broke the tense silence. There's something I don't understand, she said, staring at the photo of the young woman who might be their sister. If they went to so much trouble to hide us, to separate us, why keep Annabelle alive at all? Why not just... She couldn't finish the thought. The letter says they had to keep her as evidence, Jessica replied, eyes fixed on the road. But evidence of what? Insurance, Jonah suggested grimly. If anyone involved ever tried to back out or talk, they'd have living proof of the crime. Wendell's thoughts raced as they sped toward Lily's school. What had they stumbled into? Who were they really up against? And most troublingly, why had Ruth chosen him, of all people, to find that box in the first place? The answer hit him with such force that he gasped aloud, drawing concerned looks from the others. What is it? Jessica asked. My wife, Wendell said, his voice hollow with realization. Before she died, she was working as a paralegal for a law firm that specialized in adoption cases. She mentioned something about irregularities she'd found in old files. I never connected it until now. He pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically through old photos until he found what he was looking for, a picture of his late wife standing outside her office building. In the background, partially visible on a bronze plaque, Whitley, Chambers, and Associates. They knew, he whispered. They knew all along. That's why the box was in that house. That's why Ruth led us there. This isn't about finding the truth. We were meant to find each other. Ridgeview Psychiatric Hospital loomed against the darkening sky, a sprawling Victorian mansion renovated into a modern medical facility. Gothic spires punctuated the roofline, casting long shadows across the manicured grounds. A tasteful bronze plaque beside the wrought iron gates announced Ridgeview Psychiatric Hospital, a Chambers Foundation care facility in elegant script. Wendell sat in the passenger seat of Jessica's car, parked on a side street with a clear view of the entrance. Lily was safe with Jessica's mother, a former teacher who understood her special needs, while they conducted this risky reconnaissance. The weight of his daughter's drawing pad rested on Wendell's lap, open to the images she'd created over the past week, the 4 connected stars, the face behind the mirror, and most recently, a detailed sketch of a Victorian mansion that bore an uncanny resemblance to the building they now observed. "How could she know?" he whispered, running his finger over Lily's drawing. "She's never been here." In the back seat, Jonah leaned forward, his breath fogging the window. Maybe she didn't know consciously. Maybe she just sensed it. He exchanged a meaningful look with Eliza beside him, like Eliza's dreams about crying babies. Eliza nodded, her copper hair catching the last rays of sunset. "There's a connection between us. I felt it since we met, like finding a piece of myself I never knew was missing." Jessica checked her watch. "Dr. Thompson's scheduled visit is tomorrow morning. If Annabelle is here, that's our best chance to see her." "We can't wait that long," Wendell argued, unable to shake the feeling that time was running out. "Not with Ruth dead and people following us. We need to get inside now." "And how exactly do we do that?" Jessica countered. "It's a secure psychiatric facility. We can't just walk in and ask for a tour." A small smile curved Eliza's lips. "Actually, we can." She reached into her purse and extracted an ID badge. "I'm a licensed social worker, remember? My firm does placement evaluations for several mental health facilities in the area, including this one." An hour later, Eliza walked through Ridgeview's front doors, professional confidence in every step. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, glasses perched on her nose, a disguise simple enough to be believable. Through the tiny earpiece concealed beneath her hair, she could hear Jessica offering encouragement from the car. "Just act like you belong there," Jessica advised. "People rarely question authority if it's presented confidently." The reception area was a study in calculated calm, muted blues and greens, soft lighting, tasteful artwork depicting serene landscapes. A middle-aged woman looked up from the front desk, her smile practiced but not unkind. "May I help you?" Eliza presented her ID badge. "Eliza Donovan, Social Services. I'm doing placement follow-ups for county referrals." She consulted the clipboard she'd prepared, particularly interested in long-term care patients with limited family contact. The receptionist frowned slightly. "I wasn't aware of any scheduled evaluations today." "Last-minute directive," Eliza replied smoothly. "Budget reviews coming up, you know how it is. Everything's urgent when funding's on the line." This explanation, invoking both bureaucracy and money, worked its magic. The receptionist's expression cleared with understanding. "You'll need to sign in. Dr. Mercer is on duty tonight if you need clinical input." She pushed a visitor's log across the counter. "Will you need access to patient files?" "Just observational today," Eliza assured her. "Primarily interested in quality of life, environmental factors, social engagement opportunities." After signing in with a deliberately illegible scrawl, Eliza was issued a visitor's badge and directed down a long corridor lined with offices. Through her earpiece, she could hear Wendell's anxious breathing. "East Wing is administrative," she murmured quietly, pretending to check her notes. "I need to find the residential areas." Following discreet directional signs, Eliza made her way deeper into the facility. The decor gradually shifted. Fewer windows, more locked doors, nurse stations positioned at strategic intervals. She nodded professionally to staff members she passed, projecting purpose and authority. In her ear, Jessica whispered, "According to the building plans I pulled up, there's a separate ward on the 3rd floor. Limited access. Could be where they keep long-term patients." Eliza located a staff elevator and pressed the call button. When the doors opened, a security guard stepped out, his eyes narrowing slightly at her visitor badge. "Can I help you find something?" he asked, his tone neutral, but his posture attentive. "3rd floor assessment," Eliza replied, maintaining eye contact. "Quality review for county placements." The guard hesitated. "3rd floor is restricted. You need special clearance." Eliza consulted her clipboard with a frown. "That's odd. My paperwork specifically mentions 3rd floor evaluations. Has the location of the long-term care ward changed recently?" "No, but perhaps Dr. Mercer can clarify," Eliza suggested. "The receptionist mentioned he's on duty tonight." The name drop worked. The guard's posture relaxed slightly. "His office is down the hall, first right. He can authorize access if needed." Eliza smiled her thanks and headed in the direction indicated, her heart pounding. Once out of sight, she ducked into a supply closet. "Did you hear that?" she whispered into her concealed microphone. "The 3rd floor is restricted. I need to find another way up." "There's a service stairwell at the east end of the building." Jonah's voice came through her earpiece. Maintenance and emergency access. Navigating the labyrinthine corridors, Eliza eventually located the unmarked door leading to the service stairs. It was locked, but a passing orderly with a cart of linens unwittingly provided access when Eliza held the door for him, then slipped through behind him. The stairwell was utilitarian. Concrete steps, metal railings, emergency lighting casting harsh shadows. Eliza climbed quietly to the third floor, her breathing shallow with anticipation. The door at the top landing bore a simple placard. Specialized Care Unit. Authorized personnel only. "I'm at the third floor access," she whispered. "It's locked with keycard entry. Can you see inside at all?" Wendell asked through the earpiece. Eliza pressed her face to the narrow vertical window in the door. The hallway beyond was dimly lit, with only a few doors visible from her vantage point. A lone nurse sat at a station at the far end, her attention focused on paperwork. "It looks like a high-security ward," Eliza reported, "but I can't see much. I need that keycard." As if in answer to her dilemma, the door suddenly swung open, nearly hitting her. Eliza stumbled back as an orderly emerged, pushing a cart of medical supplies. "You shouldn't be here," he said, alarm evident in his voice. "This is a restricted area." Eliza made a split-second decision. "I got lost," she admitted, allowing embarrassment to color her tone. "I'm doing placement assessments and someone mentioned checking the specialized care facilities, but I must have misunderstood the directions." The orderly looked skeptical, but not hostile. "This ward isn't part of regular assessments. These patients have special circumstances." "What kind of circumstances?" Eliza asked, professional curiosity in her voice. The man hesitated, then shrugged. "Long-term cases. Most have been here for years, some since they were children." "That's exactly the demographic I'm evaluating," Eliza pressed. "Long-term institutional impact on social development." The orderly seemed torn between protocol and professional courtesy. Finally, he sighed. "Look, I can't let you in without clearance, but—" He glanced at his watch. "Rec period starts in 10 minutes. You can observe through the day room window if you want. It's down the hall, fourth door on the left." Eliza thanked him, trying to contain her racing heart as he continued down the stairs. She relayed the information to the team in the car, then made her way to the indicated observation point. The day room was a large space with institutional furniture arranged in conversation groups. One wall was dominated by a one-way mirror, allowing staff to observe patients without being seen. Eliza positioned herself in the darkened observation room, her breath catching as patients began to file in, accompanied by attendants. Among them was a young woman who moved with a detached grace, her copper hair, the same distinctive shade as Eliza's, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She took a seat by the window apart from the others and began to draw on a pad of paper. "I think I found her," Eliza whispered, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "She looks like me." Through the earpiece, she heard Jonah's sharp intake of breath. "What is she doing?" "Drawing," Eliza replied, watching intently. "She seems completely focused on it." The young woman, Annabelle, worked with methodical precision, her head bent over the paper. When an attendant approached, offering to join a group activity, she simply continued drawing as if she hadn't heard. Eliza strained to see what Annabelle was creating. From her angle, she could make out the familiar pattern of stars, 4 of them connected by a single line. Below them, Annabelle had drawn what appeared to be a steep roofline and a small figure standing atop it. "She's drawing the same thing Lily does," Eliza whispered in awe. "The stars, the house. Can you see anything else?" Wendell asked urgently. "Any words or writing?" Eliza squinted, trying to discern details. "There's something written at the bottom of the page. It looks like Mamãe disse que voltava." "What language is that?" Jessica's voice came through the earpiece. "Portuguese, I think," Jonah replied. "I delivered mail to the Brazilian consulate for years. It means Mommy said she would come back." A cold shiver ran down Eliza's spine. "She's been waiting all this time," she whispered. "For 20 years, she's been waiting for her mother to return." On Annabelle's thin wrist, barely visible beneath the sleeve of her institutional garb, was a faded plastic hospital bracelet, preserved as if it were a precious heirloom from a past she couldn't remember but refused to forget. Morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Little Rock's oldest cemetery, casting long shadows across weathered headstones and forgotten monuments. Wendell Hargrove stood beside a simple marble marker, its surface discolored by decades of Arkansas weather. The inscription read simply, "Baby Girl Harper, 1986-1986. Angels sang thee to thy rest." Beside him, an elderly man leaned heavily on a cane, his rheumy eyes fixed on the small grave marker. Martin Caldwell had been a county clerk in 1986, responsible for filing birth and death certificates. Now in his 80s, he was the last living link to the paper trail that had erased 4 lives and created new ones. "I knew it was wrong," Caldwell said, his voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "I knew it the moment Judge Whitley handed me those papers. 4 birth certificates, 1 death certificate, all with the same mother's name. But you didn't question Whitley back then. Not if you wanted to keep your job, not if you wanted to stay alive." Jessica Winters stood a few paces back, recorder running in her coat pocket, Jonah and Eliza flanking her like silent sentinels. After Eliza's discovery at Ridgeview the previous evening, Jessica had made one last desperate call to her editor at the station. Remarkably, the man had recognized Caldwell's name immediately. They attended the same church. "There's nothing under here, is there?" Wendell asked, gesturing to the small grave. Caldwell shook his head slowly. "Empty box, ceremonial burial. For appearances, you understand. Had to make it look proper in case anyone came asking questions." He tapped the headstone with his cane. "But there is something buried here, not a child though. Evidence." Wendell's pulse quickened. "What kind of evidence?" "Insurance," the old man replied, using the same term Jonah had suggested earlier. "I wasn't as naive as they thought. Made copies of everything before I processed those falsified documents. Birth records, hospital forms, adoption papers with the real names of the buyers, and more." He hesitated, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "The mother's journal." Jessica stepped forward. "Lydia Harper's journal, you have it?" "Had it," Caldwell corrected. "She left it behind at the hospital when they took her away. Ruth Simmons, the nurse. She saved it, gave it to me for safekeeping." A wry smile twisted his thin lips. "Ruth and I, we had an understanding back then. More than friends, less than lovers. She trusted me." "Where is it now?" Eliza asked, her voice tight with emotion. Caldwell pointed his cane toward the grave marker. 3 feet down, inside a watertight box, along with the only complete set of original birth certificates for the Harper quadruplets. Michael, Thomas, Jonathan, and Annabelle. He looked directly at Jonah and Eliza. "Your real names, your true identity." 30 minutes later, dirt-stained and trembling with anticipation, Wendell lifted a small metal lockbox from the shallow hole they dug behind the headstone. The cemetery groundskeeper, a sympathetic soul after hearing their story, had provided shovels and privacy, turning a blind eye to their unconventional excavation. The box was remarkably well preserved, its rubber seals having protected the contents from moisture and decay. With reverent care, Wendell placed it on the ground between them, the gathered group forming a circle around this unexpected treasure. "Should we open it here?" Jessica asked, glancing around the deserted cemetery. "Yes," Jonah replied firmly. "We've waited 20 years for answers. I can't wait another minute." The simple padlock yielded easily to the groundskeeper's bolt cutters. Inside, wrapped in clear plastic, lay a stack of documents, a small leather-bound journal, and 4 birth certificates, official originals with the state seal clearly visible in the corner of each. Jonah's hands trembled as he lifted the certificate bearing the name Jonathan Harper. His eyes scanned the document hungrily, absorbing the details of his true identity. "Mother, Lydia Marie Harper, 22 years old," he read aloud, his voice catching. "Father, unknown." His finger traced the time of birth, 12:17 a.m., November 12, 1986. 4 minutes after his identical twin, Michael, and 2 minutes before Thomas. Annabelle had come last at 12:24 a.m., the smallest of the 4 at just over 4 pounds. "We were born at night," Eliza whispered, examining her own certificate which bore the name she'd never known, Annabelle Harper. "Ruth must have mixed up our bracelets somehow. I'm not Eliza, I'm Annabelle." "Then who's the girl at Ridgeview?" Wendell asked, confusion creasing his brow. Jessica had been leafing through the journal, her journalist's eye scanning for key information. "Listen to this," she said, her voice hushed with discovery. "October 15th, 1986. The woman at the clinic says there are 4 heartbeats, 4 babies growing inside me. How can I possibly keep them safe when I can barely keep myself alive? But I will find a way. I promise you, my little stars, I will find a way. She turned several pages, continuing to read fragments aloud. November 8th. The contractions started today. I'm scared. The shelter won't let me stay much longer. If something happens to me, I've left instructions in the house on Maple Street. They'll find you there, my little ones. Tears streamed down Eliza's face, Annabelle's face, as Jessica continued reading. November 13th. They won't let me see my babies. The nurse with kind eyes smuggled in photos. They're so beautiful, so perfect. 4 little stars in the darkness of this world. The police came again today. They say I'm unstable, that I need help. They don't understand. I just need my children. The final entries were increasingly disjointed, documenting Lydia Harper's desperate battle to reclaim her children, commitments to psychiatric facilities, accusations of delusions when she insisted she'd given birth to quadruplets, not the single stillborn girl the official records showed, release, homelessness, and then a chilling final entry from 1993. I've found the house again. Our house, where we were going to live before everything fell apart. It's empty now, condemned. But I'll stay close, I'll watch over it. I'll leave my message in the stars, hidden where only my children will find it, if they ever come looking for me. I'll be nearby, always, waiting on the rooftop where I can see the whole world, watching for your return. My little stars, forgive me for failing you. I tried, I swear I tried. Silence fell over the group as the full weight of the tragedy settled upon them. Lydia Harper had never abandoned her children. They had been stolen from her through an elaborate scheme involving some of Little Rock's most powerful citizens. And she had spent years watching over the dilapidated house on Maple Street, waiting for a reunion that never came. The house where I found the box, Wendell said slowly. The one scheduled for demolition. That's where she was living. Not living, Jonah corrected, understanding dawning in his eyes. Waiting. She must have hidden the box in the roof space, hoping someday one of us would find it. Jessica was examining the remaining documents from the lockbox. There's more, she said grimly. Receipts, payment records, hundreds of thousands of dollars changing hands for the adoption of the Harper triplets. She held up a document bearing the Chambers Foundation letterhead and a contract for the lifelong care of patient E.H. at Ridgeview Psychiatric. E.H., Wendell repeated, not A.H. As Ruth's notes indicated, Eliza, now known to be Annabelle, gasped with sudden understanding. Eliza Harper, the girl at Ridgeview. She's Eliza, the real Eliza, my sister. The pieces finally aligned with devastating clarity. 4 babies born, 3 sold to wealthy families seeking private adoptions with no questions asked. The 4th, the smallest, weakest girl, kept hidden away in a psychiatric facility under a falsified identity, living proof of the crime should anyone involved ever threaten to expose the scheme. And now, 20 years later, the truth was finally emerging from the shadows of corruption and greed that had torn apart a family before it ever had a chance to be whole. We need to get her out, Jonah said, determination hardening his features. Our sister, the real Eliza. We need to bring her home. Home, Annabelle repeated, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. But where is home? Wendell carefully gathered the documents back into the box. I think I know, he said quietly. The house on Maple Street. That's where your mother wanted you to be. That's where she left her message, the 4 stars connected by a line. Your family constellation. 3 days later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, an unlikely family gathered on the vacant lot where the house on Maple Street had once stood. The demolition had been temporarily halted after Jessica's explosive expose had aired on Channel 7, detailing the decades-long conspiracy that had separated the Harper quadruplets. Judge Whitley had been arrested, his reputation in tatters. Edward Chambers had fled the country, his foundation's charitable facade crumbling as investigations revealed a network of fraud and corruption. Dr. Thompson had provided a full confession from his nursing home bed, the burden of guilt finally lifted from his failing mind. And most importantly, Eliza Harper, the real Eliza, had been released from Ridgeview into the custody of her siblings, her quiet presence a testament to the resilience of the human spirit after years of isolation. Now the 4 stars of Lydia Harper's constellation stood together for the first time since their birth, joined by Wendell and Lily, whose inexplicable connection to their story had been the catalyst for reunion. Eliza, thin, pale, and silent, clutched the hospital bracelet she'd worn for 20 years, her wide eyes taking in the sunset with childlike wonder. "She would have been here," Jonah said softly, his arm around his newfound sister's shoulders. "Our mother, standing right here watching over this place." "She was," Annabelle replied, her gaze drawn to the empty space where a roof had once been, the roof where Lydia Harper had waited, hoping against hope to glimpse her stolen children returning home. In every way that mattered, she never left us. As twilight deepened around them, Lily approached Eliza with cautious steps, offering her a drawing, 4 stars connected by a single line with a simple caption beneath, "Family found." Eliza accepted the gift with trembling hands, her lips curving in what might have been her first genuine smile in decades. And in that moment, on the ground where hope had seemed to die but had instead lain dormant, waiting for the right season to bloom, the constellation of stars that Lydia Harper had cherished became whole once more. There was no perfect ending. Too much had been lost, too many years stolen. But there was truth. There was justice. And there was at long last the beginning of healing. As Wendell watched the reunited siblings standing shoulder to shoulder against the darkening sky, he thought of Lily's words that had seemed so cryptic at the time, but now rang with profound clarity. Some layers don't have walls, but they carry within them the courage to never give up on love. What defines a family? Is it blood connections hidden for 20 years, or is it the courage to seek truth when others demand silence? As we've witnessed in this heartbreaking journey, sometimes the most important bonds are the ones we fight hardest to discover. Lydia Harper never stopped believing her children would find their way back to each other, leaving behind clues that only love could decipher. If faced with such devastating loss, would you have the strength to wait on that rooftop year after year, watching and hoping? Would you recognize the invisible threads connecting you to strangers who share your blood, but not your memories? The Harper quadruplets remind us that family isn't always what we're given at birth, but what we reclaim through perseverance and truth. Some stories leave marks on our hearts that time cannot erase. If this account of separation, discovery, and reunion has touched you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of connection, and subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary true stories that challenge our understanding of family, justice, and the resilient human spirit.